I think we had a really great meeting, and we're very proud of the party. We like our leader. We like everybody really in the room. I don't like a few people, but that's okay. I think you know who they are. But I'll give you that information someday. But for the most part, we have a really well-unified party.
Boy, he said a lot in a little bit of time right there. We like the speaker. We like everybody in the room, which I think is what he was thinking. Politically, I should come out here and say everything's great. And then he says, well, not everybody. And then you know what he's talking about there. There are some Republican senators who are not too fond of the president, who maybe had a little bit of a hand in getting them primaried, so their terms might be up. They have policy differences, and the president had what we've heard is a pretty hostile meeting yesterday with those Senate Republicans there on Capitol Hill. Let's get to the man covering all that is going on in Congress, the chief congressional correspondent for Fox News, Chad Pergram, joins us once again. Welcome back to the show, Chad. Thanks for being with us.
Hey there, Annie. Thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about this meeting that took place yesterday? There's reports that there was maybe even some shouting.
Well, we know that Bill Cassidy, the Republican senator from Louisiana, who has opposed the president on a number of issues, and the president opposed him, did not support him in his primary. He's lost his primary. He's not going to be a senator after January 3rd. And he went at him on Iran. He has had differences of opinion with, RFK Jr. as the Health and Human Services Secretary, reluctantly supported him, has been critical of him from time to time about vaccines afterwards. He chairs the Senate Health Committee, so he was somebody who was willing to, and is a doctor himself, was willing to kind of, get into the nitty-gritty about health policy. But what I thought was remarkable about this is that he came out, the president did, he walked down the corridor with John Thune, who he repeatedly does not call out. He criticizes Republicans. He says that you don't have the votes for the Save America Act, which would require the proof of citizenship to vote. And then he walked out of the meeting, visuals say a lot, with Rick Scott, who invited him to the meeting, went over the head of John Thune, by the way, the Republican senator from Florida, Mike Lee of Utah, who's probably the biggest advocate for the Save America Act in the Senate. And then Thune came along just a couple of seconds later. And frankly, the president didn't say much. It was a lot of venting. We heard from, what he had to say, talking about the election in 2020. But then there was this very testy exchange with Bill Cassidy. This is where it gets good. So Cassidy admitted that he got his Irish up. He wasn't going to back down. And he that's the term he used. He said, I'm Irish. So later he was invited to the White House, to the Situation Room, and they had yet another procedural vote related to an Iran War Powers Act. And this time it didn't pass. Rand Paul voted present. And guess what? Bill Cassidy had changed his mind.
Wow.
So, people are trying to read into that, what that means, especially somebody, did he get something out of this? Did he just have to kind of vent to the president? But at the end of the day, this meeting was supposed to be about the Save America Act. And I don't know that they are any closer in trying to accomplish that than they were. Now, I was told by a senior source here last night that they want to kind of get that into reconciliation. That's the budget process that they're going to try to do. This 3.0 is what that's the only number I hear about this bill. I don't know how much it costs. I know that it's going to be the third version of reconciliation, the same process they used for the one big beautiful bill last year. And you can't just put policy into a piece of legislation like that. In other words, the Save America Act. But if you somehow make it about money and grants or something like that and incentivize states to take it, well, then maybe that would pass muster with the Senate Parliamentarian. And I just talked a few moments ago with Jody Arrington, who's the chair of the Budget Committee, who's in charge of writing this up. He's from Texas. And he says, our window is closing, but, maybe now we have a shot. But I want to see when they get this done. Guess what? The Senate, after they took that Iran vote last night, they did not meet today.
Yeah.
They're out until the 13th of July. The House took one vote today because the floor is all locked up, because Anna Paulina Luna, the Republican representative from Florida, says, I'm not going to allow them to put other bills on the floor unless they pass the Save America Act. So the House is not going to be in session tomorrow. So this window keeps closing. So when all this is going to magically happen, I don't know. We keep hearing about it, but, it's like, Christmas is coming, but we don't know when. And guess what? It's June.
Yeah, I think we're 6 months out today. Chad Pergram speaking with us today. Just as a point of interest here, when you talk about how Anna Paulina Luna is holding up the House floor, how does that work? How does one Congresswoman get to say, to put her foot down and say nothing happens until we take the vote on this?
Well, it is about the math, and you need a block of people. She has indicated that, when you have a tight majority in the House, which the Republicans do, you need every single vote. And there's still people who are out. Tom Kaine Jr. is supposed to come back next week. The Republican representative from New Jersey has been spotted. He says he'll be here next week. He's been out on an undisclosed medical issue that's, been a big issue of consternation here on Capitol Hill for a while. But when you have other members who are willing to go along with you, and you just need a couple, and we think that the number might be closer to maybe 20 or 30, you have to have in the House what they call a rule. You have to pass a rule before you go to most pieces of legislation. The rule explains how you're going to play baseball today. In other words, how long is the debate going to be? Are you going to have any amendments in order at all to be considered? How long will you consider those amendments? And then you vote. So if you don't agree to the rules of the game ahead of time, then you can't play the game. So that we've seen in this Congress an astonishing number of rules defeated. That it used to be a very pro forma thing. I mean, we went, a couple of decades around here with only a couple of rule votes failing in the House, and now we've had multiple ones. I think the number's like 10 or 11 this Congress alone. So that tells you a lot. So they can control the floor, especially when you have a determined group of people who are of the majority party who are willing to buck what the majority leadership wants to do. And that's a little bit unprecedented in the modern Congress.
So if the Save America Act were to get connected to some sort of reconciliation bill, that would skip the 60 votes required to move past the filibuster, and then they would need a simple majority, 50-50 tie, and Vice President J.D.
In the
Vance.
House and Senate, right.
Okay.
And they have to have the parliamentarian agree. Now, you hear all the time that, President Trump has said a couple of times that they should fire the parliamentarian.
Who is the parliamentarian?
Elizabeth McDonough.
And how does where's she come
from? She is
from?
a nonpartisan umpire. She's been here for decades. There's only been, I think, a little more than a handful of parliamentarians in the history of the Senate.
Wow.
And, they historically have served both Republicans and Democrats. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Wow. If they were to fire the parliamentarian, her number two, Lee Hildebrand, she's going to rule the same way as Elizabeth McDonough. You see where this is going. It's not like there's a lot of people who can do this job unless you were to do the following, and nobody's ever said this to me, but this is me just thinking outside the box because we're in this era. Could you fire the parliamentarian and just say, okay, we are going to put somebody in who's just going to make rulings our way. We're the Cardinals, we're playing the Reds. We're going to call every pitch against the Reds a strike and every pitch against. I mean, you could do that. Yeah. Somebody who doesn't have that background. I think that would probably be bad for the Senate as an institution if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Set a terrible precedent, but you could do that. Or, nowhere does it say you have to have a parliamentarian. You could conceivably, and some people argued this early last year, when they were, especially on the very far right, that they were very upset with John Thune, and maybe they're more upset with him now, frankly. But they said, well, Vice President Vance should just preside, and he is the president of the Senate, and he could make rulings to the Republicans' favor from the chair. The parliamentarian construct is something that's tied to the modern Senate, early 20th century. The idea that you used to have probably until about the 1950s, the vice president used to preside most of the time over the Senate. You could do that, and we're kind of in an era of where we do extraordinary things in politics.
Yes.
But I've not heard that. I've not heard much chatter about that. I'm just telling you what is possible and what some people have proposed. Not that I think that they've put a lot of stock on those ideas here on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating because there's so much process that happens. It's, I guess, more understandable if you refer to it as sausage making, but there's so much that goes into it where people are like, oh, vote for it or vote against it. I think a lot of Americans don't understand the filibuster or the 60 vote.
It's challenging, yes,
Yeah.
and and this is where if you understand the rules in the House and Senate, and I've said this before, perhaps even on your program, where if you really got all 541 people in the building, meaning the House, the Senate, plus the 6 non-voting delegates from Puerto Rico and Guam and D.C., I bet there's no more than about 20, maybe 30 who really understand the rules.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage, I would think, if you've spent the time.
And the people who mostly have been successful up here are the ones who know the rules. Robert Byrd, the late Democratic leader from West Virginia, was absolutely masterful, whether you liked him or not. Bob Dole was very good. Harry Reid, I used to think when he was the majority leader and minority leader, sometimes he would outfox Bill Frist, who was the Republican leader in the Senate for a number of years. Mitch McConnell was very good, frankly. So if you know the rule, I'm a baseball fan.
Yeah.
And I used to really like Whitey Herzog when he managed the Cardinals.
Small ball.
Why? Because he knew the rules.
Mm-hmm.
He would do things that would be to the advantage of the Cardinals with the rules. Little things, little plays, arguments with the umpire.
The details.
And exactly. And I always kind of admired that and appreciated that. And the same is true here on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because if you know the details, you can use them to your advantage and
Bingo.
Other people can't. So you can go the extra mile, you can learn it, and you can achieve because of it. You mentioned Mitch McConnell. I did see a report here recently that he had been in the hospital. What can you tell us about the senator's status from Kentucky?
We ain't seen him. He has been gone for about 3 weeks now. In fact, the first statement that we got from his staff, it said that he was in the hospital and receiving excellent care. Said nothing about A, what had happened, or B, where he was in the hospital or what his condition was. In the days succeeding that, I talked to a few senators and nobody had heard from him. When he had gone to the hospital before, senators had talked to him. Now, they put out a statement earlier this week saying he would not be back this week. So he's probably not going to be back until the middle of July. But we've had a number of health episodes with him. As I say, he was 8 days in the hospital with flu-like symptoms back in February. He fell last fall, at the Capitol and had to be helped to his feet. He, froze up twice last summer, in the summer of 2023, in July of 2023, at a press conference here at the Capitol, and then also at a press conference in northern Kentucky. He tripped and fell in 2023. He got a concussion and a fractured rib, and he was away from the Senate for about 6 weeks. So he's had a number of these episodes happen. And when it comes down to those numbers, I talk about two people here who have not been around, Tom Kean Jr. and Mitch McConnell. That creates a problem if you're trying to pass something in the House or Senate.
Yeah, certainly does. Just a quick Google search says, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that if a United States senator has to be removed from office for any particular reason, they're not able to continue their service, that it is filled only by a special election. There's no governor appointee that gets put into that position. They'd actually have to have an election, and Senator McConnell's term would be up at the end of this year, correct? Yeah,
he would be done in January. And each state, does this differently. They had changed the law in Kentucky so that whoever is appointed to the Senate, you can appoint to the Senate, you cannot appoint to the House, has to be somebody that is of the same party of that senator. That is the law in the state of Kentucky. That's up to Kentucky how they would handle that. And you can't remove somebody. I remember there was even for health, there was a senator back in the 1940s who was the chairman of a major committee and wasn't here for years. He was a senator from Virginia and literally had gotten reelected, and through the mid-1940s was not here for several years. Because it's his seat. It's her seat. It's up to them. And you can't just, unless you were to expel them, you could do that. That takes 2/3. They've done that a little more in the Senate than they have in the House. I don't think they're going to expel somebody over health. So, then you get into another very dangerous precedent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chad Pergram, we're grateful for you. Last question, real quick before you go, yes or no. Do you think that the Republicans can muster 50 votes should they get this Save America Act into a reconciliation package? Do you think they can get to 50?
Well, you have to start in the House. And you have to start in the House and see what they're willing to put up, what this thing looks like. And you have a lot of conservatives who say, every last dollar of this has to be offset.
Yeah.
Remember that one of the components of this is going to be money for the Pentagon and about $80 to $90 billion minimum to restock munitions and foot the bill for the war in Iran. Okay, where's all that money going to come from? And are you going to have the votes to do that? I say this first because you got to get this through the House, but then you have to do the Senate, and the Senate is very skeptical of doing anything on this front. And it's really a four-step process. You have to have a budget resolution first. The House has to approve the same thing that the Senate will approve. Then you have a long voting process there that might put vulnerable senators on the record on things they don't want to vote on, like maybe reflecting pools or weaponization funds or whatever. And then you do it all again on the actual bill. So 4 rounds of that, 2 in the House, 2 in the Senate minimum, with a lot of politics. I think the chances of getting this done are probably in the lower 30 to maybe high 20s in terms of percentages. Mm-hmm. But I would never rule anything out.
Yeah. Like you said, who knows what will happen next? Chad Pergram, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show with us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We're grateful for it.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye. Chief Congressional Correspondent for Fox News, Chad Pergram, on X at Chad Pergram, Pergram. Follow him. He's got great stuff there. You can stay at the forefront of all of this stuff because it is fast moving. And it really is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like really comfortable in my nerdery here, but there's some really interesting things that are taking place right now in this moment in our American government. And the Republicans, while they're not doing it to the extent that I think a lot of their supporters would want them to do, they are actually trying things in a different capacity than the generations of Republicans that have come before them.